I'm Steve Rasmussen. I'd like to welcome everyone to our annual appointments and promotions ceremony. Unfortunately, we're having to do this by Zoom. That having been said, it's great to have the opportunity to celebrate the accomplishments of our faculty, and we appreciate your coming on board this evening. To start off, I'd like to make certain that I thank Holly Wilker in particular for not only putting this program together this evening, but also for all the work that she does for the faculty in the promotion sphere. Without her, I'm quite certain that there would probably be half the number of people promoted in our department that have been promoted. She's been a stalwart for organizing this for the course of the past 15 years. So thank you very much, Holly, as well as Fatima, as well as Megan and Media Services, who have helped put this program together this evening. This is an opportunity that we have once a year to celebrate the accomplishments of so many of our faculty. You've heard before, and I would just reiterate that we have always the best prepared dossiers and the most accomplished faculty, in my opinion, that comes through the promotions committee at Brown. It's a privilege for me to have the opportunity to review the incredible work that is done every year, and this year has been no exception. I encourage you, in addition to this program, to take the opportunity to congratulate those faculty who you were in contact with for all the accomplishments they have completed. So with that, I'd first like to thank our committee chairs. And if Media Services can bring up Van Miller, the chair of our full faculty promotions committee, Marge Weishar, who almost everybody on this call knows, and who has been the person who has been chairing the clinical promotions committee for many years, and Barbara Thylenda, who has graciously taken over Marge's position, and she has very big shoes to fill, but I understand she's well on the way to beginning to fill them. I want to say a few words about Marge and her accomplishments and what she's done for our department over Marge, I would say 35 to 40 year period. Marge trained with Aaron Beck. She's been an integral member of the department since the 1970s, I would say, actually, as has Van. She's chaired this clinical promotions committee, which is not the easiest of jobs, for 16 years. And she has really epitomized the type of person that we would like to see promoted in the Department of Psychiatry and Human Behavior. She's been an outstanding teacher and mentor to so many of the faculty. She's put her shoulder to the wheel to make certain that others get promoted. And she has been an incredible colleague and will be sorely missed, not only by the Clinical Promotions Committee, but also by all of our faculty. So thank you so much for all the contributions you've made over all these years, Marjorie. With that, I want to make certain that Van doesn't follow in your footsteps too quickly. He has also, of course, been with us almost and perhaps even a bit longer in terms of his service to the full Faculty Promotions Committee. We're trying to streamline the program tonight, so we're not going to be having them talk about the work of their committee individually this year. But certainly one of the things that has always been the case is Holly, Van, and now Barbara Talenda are the go-to people for finding out what you need to do to get promoted. And you can be assured that all of us are intent on getting each of your accomplishments recognized and all of our faculty promoted if possible. So before we move to the promotions, I want to say a couple words about another special faculty member of our department, Rena Wing. And I want to acknowledge the special accomplishments of Rena Wing, who this year was the recipient of the 2020 Stunkard Lifetime Achievement Award from the Society of Obesity. This is a very distinguished award, one of many that Rena has gotten over the course of a stellar career. And it's on top of a very impressive list, as I said, of previous honors and awards, including her being the first recipient of the annual Distinguished Research Award given out by Brown in 2018. She was the recipient, really a feather in the cap for our department, but also for her. The author of over 550 peer-reviewed publications, she's been one of the most prolific grant getters in the entire university for over 2 decades. And perhaps more important has been her record of mentoring faculty. You'll see tonight she has half of our full-time faculty who's getting promoted practically this year. And over the years, she has mentored so many faculty who have gone on to distinguished careers of their own. So Rena, we all tip our hat to you, and we could look forward to continued years of productivity. We hope that you're with us for the next decade. So now I'd like to move on to the main part of our program, promotions. And I would ask Van Miller, who is the first to present Brandon Gaudiano. Van?
So it's my great pleasure to introduce Brandon Gaudiano to the rank of professor in our department. Brandon joined Brown as a member of our psychology residency program in 2004, stayed on to do a T32 fellowship, and then joined the faculty in 2006 as part of the psychosocial research program at Butler. During his time here, he's really been a triple threat. He's been really excellent in research, clinical work, and teaching. He's developed an international reputation as an expert in psychological treatment of severe mental disorders. And he's been one of the most prolific people that I know in terms of our faculty. In fact, as I was looking over an early draft of the program, I noticed that it listed him as having 1,150 publications. And I thought to myself, well, that couldn't be right. But then for a minute I said, well, maybe it could. And of course, it really was a typo. He only has 150 publications, but his productivity is such that it actually made me stop and think that maybe that number could have been correct, and maybe someday, who knows. Along with his academic skills, Brandon is an excellent clinician. He's got particular skills in acceptance and commitment therapy and in the treatment of psychotic disorders. Recently, he's taken on a leadership role in the new transitional outpatient program at Butler Hospital and is a valued supervisor in our psychology training program. Recently, he's carried on a tradition in the psychosocial research program by having one of his former research assistants join us in our psychology residency program. Brandon and I have collaborated on many papers and grants, and he's one of my most valued colleagues. He's also a much desired collaborator with many other faculty in our department and in the country and around the world. So in light of all his accomplishments, he's richly deserving of this promotion to full professor, and I'm pleased to welcome him to our full professor ranks. So congratulations, Brandon.
I'm Rena Wing. I'll go ahead and start. I have Andrea Goldschmidt. He's my first person I'll be talking about. So in the year, about 5 years ago, I received an email or a letter actually from someone named Andrea Goldschmidt. And Andrea said she was looking for a position. Maybe she would be interested in coming to the Weight Control Center. Well, I sort of thought, okay, what could I lose by meeting her? She already had a K-23, so it was going to give her 5 years of funding. And she'd already proven herself to be able to direct something as the director, first the co-director, and then the interim director of the Eating Disorders Program at the University of Chicago. So I thought, what could I lose? And we brought her over to the Weight Control Center, hired her here, and I have never looked back. It has been the most wonderful decision I ever made. Andrea's been mentored really by me and by Elisa Jalalian, and has really helped us develop a whole pediatric obesity program within the center. After having the K-23, she went on to get an RO3, and then she's had at least 2 RO1s. But who's counting? I mean, there may have been a third one, I never remember. She's always studying the neurocognitive mechanisms that relate to the development of obesity and eating disorders, and has been very involved in those areas. More recently, though, she's developed a whole new area, which has to do with the dissemination and implementation of evidence-based treatments for adolescents with restrictive eating disorders. She currently co-leads 2 studies focusing on delivering family-based treatments and cognitive behavioral treatments for eating disorders in the context of community-based mental health agencies. So Andrea also contributes to the Academy of Eating Disorders and Eating Disorders Research Society, serves on the editorial board of a lot of different journals. She's been an ad hoc reviewer for NIH, co-author of over 100 publications. I think one of the most interesting things about Andrea, though, is she does all this while also being the mom of 3 young boys who we know keep her busy, tired, and I hope laughing most of the time. But one of the things about Andrea is if you ever get an email at 4:30 a.m., you know it's Andrea up working, because that's her quiet professional time. So Andrea, we are so thrilled that you are now an associate professor, Prenz researcher. And I'm so thrilled that we made the decision to bring you here. And it was the best decision we've ever made. So my second person that I'd like to talk about today is Jason Lillis. Jason, unfortunately, could not be here tonight. But he joined my research group in the year 2011. And one of the interesting things about Jason was at that time, I had received a grant with a colleague on acceptance and commitment therapy for obesity, except it was really the colleague's grant, and I knew nothing about ACT, really nothing. And so I was looking around, that colleague ended up leaving, and she left the grant with me. So here I am, PI of a grant on ACT, and I know nothing about ACT. So I began to look for somebody who might like to move here. And so who did I identify but Jason Lillis? Jason Lillis did not only know a little bit about ACT, he had completed his PhD in clinical psych at the University of Nevada, Reno, where he trained with Steve Hayes, who everyone knows is sort of the father of ACT. And he had been one of the master trainers within ACT. So he came here in 2011 and began to help me with this research project. Over the years since then, Jason received a K-23, then an RO3, then an RO1. And all of this research has related to developing and testing acceptance-based interventions for improving weight maintenance and health promotion. About half of his research now involves actual obesity, and the other involves encouraging people who are sedentary to be physically active. Jason also does a great deal of mentoring. He supervises 2 current and 3 previous postdoctoral students. And he's organized a collaborative research group on weight stigma that's developing a lot of new projects. So I'm very, very thrilled that he's able to be promoted, or was able to be promoted, to associate professor at the Weight Control Center. And the third person I'm proud to introduce is Jessica Unick. Jessica couldn't be here tonight because she's busy running treatment groups. So she's a little different than many of the people at the Weight Control Center, who are many of them are clinical psychologists. Jessica completed her PhD in exercise physiology from the University of Pittsburgh. She then came here to do a 2-year postdoc funded by the T32 in cardiovascular behavioral medicine. And I was her mentor during that time. Since then, she's been busy publishing and getting grants. She's got a PI on a grant through NCI, one through NIDDK, and she also has an advanced CTR grant. She also serves as a co-investigator on a number of grants too. So Dr. Unick's research focuses primarily on understanding the role of physical activity in weight control. She's very convinced that there's many different reasons why physical activity is so important within weight control, and that those may involve things such as psychosocial processes and stress-induced eating and food cravings, all of which could be influenced by physical activity. She's also been very interested in the variability in response to physical activity interventions. Finally, she has another area of research that I think is very interesting, which is to look at what predicts success in early intervention, from the early intervention. So she'll look at the very initial period of intervention and see how a person's doing and see to what extent that predicts long-term outcomes. And she finds that by 4 weeks, you can tell how a person is doing. And that's led to a whole new area of research for her. So these are my 3 people who've all been promoted to associate professors in Pren's research. And I just want to, again, thank all of them for all they do for the Weight Control Center. And Steve, I want to thank you for your lovely introduction, which I did not expect at all. So thank you.
Hello, hi, I'm Ben Greenberg, and it is my pleasure to introduce Masha van Wout-Frank, who many of you know, and is being promoted to associate professor. Masha is an excellent example of the benefits of immigration to our country, having come to us after getting a PhD in the highly unusual to me and interdisciplinary field of cognitive neuropsychiatry from the University of Utrecht. And she arrived at Brown after a stint at the University of Arizona in 2009, where she began in CLIPS as a postdoc, and then as an assistant professor. Once she got a NARSAT award, I was privileged to be one of her mentors on that. And in 2012, she joined our department. She really is an example of someone who not only came from another country with different traditions and approaches to academics to some extent, but crosses fields really quite impressively. So you could call her, to use the overused phrase, a triple threat. She can translate between cognitive neuroscience to aspects of clinical psychiatry. She is an accomplished researcher and manager of research. She is also really good at teaching and dissemination. Among her highlights there has been a presentation not only to many high-level people at the VA, for example, where she is an integral part of our Center for Neurorestoration and Neurotechnology, but also to members of the US Congress on Capitol Hill and their staff members, showing in particular her current focus, which is using non-invasive brain stimulation to augment a cognitive affective neuroscience process of extinction memory and extinction memory recall, which we think is very involved in the benefits of exposure-based therapy for, among other things, PTSD. So there's the real prospect of improvement in treatment using these modalities. And she is exploring this further after her selection as one of our project leaders in our COBRA Center for Neuromodulation based at Butler. So crossing institutions as well as disciplines once again. And she did this while being the parent of small children who sometimes appear on Zoom meetings of various kinds, but they don't monopolize the conversation. Masha manages to assure that. I just have to say we are delighted to see Masha's trajectory. She is highly deserving of this promotion. And I am delighted to again welcome her to the ranks of an associate professor as someone who is a triple threat, but really not at all threatening. Thanks.
I'm Larry Brown, and it's my pleasure to present Dr. Laura Whiteley, whom I first met when she was an adult psychiatry resident interested in doing research. I was impressed, as I'm sure everyone is, by her enthusiasm, intelligence, and ambitious goals. I warned her that she couldn't accomplish everything in a year, and that lots of people start out enthusiastic, but it often fades. She assured me she would be fine, and she was. And she's become a wonderful colleague and a terrific research collaborator. She is recognized as an expert in mHealth interventions for those living with HIV or at risk for becoming infected. She's a PI on an NIMH R1 and several R34s. What I didn't recognize in that first hour with her was that she would listen patiently, thoughtfully, and studiously to all of my advice about her professional development and then ignore it. I have constantly warned her not to be distracted from her research career, not to take extra shifts at the ACI, not to develop and then leave the young adult program at Rhode Island Hospital, not to become the associate director of the general psychiatry residency. Sorry, Tracy, but I did say that. But she's ignored it all and succeeded. So Laura, congratulations on your promotion as associate professor in the research scholar track. I realize now that you've become an outstanding researcher, a superb clinician, and a dedicated teacher, not in spite of ignoring my advice, but precisely because you ignored it, and it's helped shape who you are. Again, congratulations. So that's the last of our academic promotions, and we're shifting now to the clinical faculty promotions. I have the privilege of presenting Dr. Ann Walters, who is being promoted to professor in the clinical educator track. I first met Ann many years ago when we were in a book club together. If you ever want to know what someone's really like, you should see them in action in a book club. Some members have the same complaints about every book they read, and some don't even read the book at all, and still they discuss it at great length. Well, that's not Ann. She read every book completely, with passages underlined for immediate reference as she made solid, perceptive comments about the emotional lives of the characters or their cultural context. And she did it all gracefully, without shaming anyone, although I thought she could have shamed the blowhard that didn't read the books. All those wonderful characteristics have led Ann to her success as an academic leader, teacher, and scholar. She developed and is director of the Children's Partial Program at Bradley Hospital, which is a model of excellent clinical care and teaching. She's chief of psychology at Bradley and has done an outstanding job at creating a supportive and unified department. She's a strong advocate for child mental health in the larger lifespan system. She's on the board of trustees of the Lifespan Physician Group, for example. She's also the editor of the Brown University Child and Adolescent Behavior Letter, where she contributes thoughtful editorials every month. and has made it a vehicle for academic scholarship for many of those in the division who otherwise would not think of writing a paper. Congratulations, Anne. You're a wonderful leader, teacher, scholar, and book club member.
I'm thrilled to be able to celebrate the promotion of my dear friend, Dr. Julie Bergers, to professor, clinician, educator. I'm really in awe of Julie. We really all want to be that person who embodies clinical excellence, superb teaching, and rigorous research, but it's very, very hard, and virtually none of us can do all of those three things very well. But Julie is truly a stunning example of that. Julie has had many roles at Hasbro, but currently she's co-director of the Pediatric Sleep Disorders Clinic. During her time as co-director, the program has actually tripled in size and grown a reputation as the place to receive evidence-based interventions for pediatric sleep problems. Julie's also sought after as a research collaborator and currently serves as an active co-investigator on grants relating to childhood chronic health conditions and sleep. She's published in many venues, from academic journals to practice-oriented publications. Julie is an exceptional supervisor and mentor, and really an amazing example of someone who really, truly integrates science into her practice. In the pediatric sleep clinic, she's known for seamlessly integrating trainees into clinical encounters with families. Evaluations describe her as a phenomenal supervisor, comment on her passion for teaching and mentorship. Julie's won the Dean's Teaching Excellence Award based on her outstanding reputation and her consistently stellar evaluations. And lastly, Julie's quick wit and sense of humor are legendary and are really part of what makes her an exceptional colleague and really a true friend. We are very, very fortunate to have her on our faculty, and I'm just so happy to congratulate her on her promotion to full professor.
It is my absolute honor, as my first time presenting to the promotions night, to present my longtime colleague, Dr. Ernestine Jennings, for promotion to Associate Clinical Professor. Dr. Jennings came to us from the University of Oklahoma as part of the internship program, stayed on at the Center for Behavioral and Preventive Medicine for a postdoctoral fellowship with Bess Marcus, and has been there ever since. Dr. Jennings, I was gonna uniquely call her a triple threat, but that word's been overused tonight. But she literally could have been promoted in teaching, in clinical work, and in research to associate professor. She truly seamlessly does them all. She has done clinical work ranging from behavioral medicine, including smoking cessation, general behavioral medicine, weight management. She's also serving as a health behavior specialist and providing integrated primary care, integrated behavioral health in a primary care setting. She's done teaching within clinical work. She provides clinical supervision to psychology residents and postdoctoral fellows in adult psychiatry and behavioral health. She also has an amazing research career with a very unique area. She has expertise in exercise as well as smoking cessation, and is particularly interested in smoking cessation in postpartum women. She recently served as MPI for an R41 and an R03 grant through NIDA. She's also received independent funding from NCI and has served as a valuable co-investigator on numerous grants. And I think one of the things that we all know her best for is her commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion within the Department of Psychiatry, and her tireless efforts as head of the diversity committee, one of the most longstanding, I believe, diversity committees at our university, in the Department of Psychiatry and Human Behavior. She also serves as a mentor within the diversity committee and serves on the DPHB Anti-Racism Steering Committee, as well as the Lifespan Advisory Committee on Anti-Racism and Health Equity. Finally, she serves as a mentor through the Office of Diversity and Multicultural Affairs and MedStep program. She is truly a remarkable asset to our department and to our center. She does all of this with a huge smile on her face and is one of the most positive people I know in all aspects, in research, in clinical work, in her training. She has made the diversity committee a super welcoming place for everyone that comes from trainee to faculty. And I'm just thrilled to have her at our center, and we're super lucky to have her joining the ranks of associate professor in our department. Congratulations, Ernestine.
Good evening. It is my pleasure and honor to present Dr. Carrie Kim for promotion to Clinical Associate Professor this evening. Dr. Kim received her BA in psychology from the University of Rhode Island in 1998 and her PhD from the University of Kansas in clinical child psychology. She then completed her pre-doctoral internship and postdoctoral fellowship, specializing in the assessment and treatment of childhood mood and anxiety disorders at Children's National Hospital. Dr. Kim began a position as a staff psychologist within the research program at Bradley Hospital in 2011 and was appointed clinical assistant professor in 2012. Since her faculty appointment, Dr. Kim has been a very active member of the department through publishing and contributing to the clinical and training missions at Bradley Hospital and to the department. She is currently the program manager for the Mindful Teen DBT for Adolescent program at Bradley Hospital, and this highlights her clinical interest and expertise in the treatment of suicide and self-injury among youth presenting with severe emotion dysregulation. Her research interests focus on identifying individual and environmental factors influencing mindful teen treatment outcomes so as to inform and improve services available to children and their families. We have very much appreciated having her in this leadership role and her ability to build a very strong team, given her natural collaborative inclinations and the way that she has been able to bring research into our clinical treatment as well. She's also has a very strong commitment to the teaching mission of the department, and she serves as the primary faculty for a DBT, a postdoc fellowship, and is an outpatient supervisor for the Clinical Outcomes Fellowship. She also serves as the primary contact for the psychology residents and psychiatry fellows, completing supplementary rotations with the Mindful Teen program, and she coordinates an annual seminar series for trainees on DBT with adolescents. It has been a great honor to introduce her this evening, and this promotion is very well deserved.
Good evening. I'm Tracy Guthrie, and I have the privilege of presenting to you Dr. Diana Ledowski. Dr. Ledowski received her bachelor's degree with honors in social relations from Harvard College and her PhD in clinical psychology from the Institute for Advanced Psychological Studies at Adelphi University, about 20 minutes from where I grew up. She completed her clinical psychology internship at the Alpert Einstein College of Medicine and stayed on for a doctoral fellowship in adult clinical psychology. Dr. Ledowski's professional affiliations include the International Association for Psychoanalytic Self-Psychology, where she serves on several committees and has presented internationally. She is also an associate editor for IAP-SP's journal, Psychoanalysis, Self, and Context. Dr. Ledowski joined the Department of Psychiatry and Human Behavior as a clinical assistant professor in 1992. She has served as director of psychotherapy training in the adult psychiatry residency since 2006. She has profoundly impacted our residency program since that time. She revamped our psychotherapy curriculum to make sure that psychotherapy was taught in an accessible way for our trainees. Thanks to her dedication, our program is nationally recognized as a place to be well trained in psychotherapy. Whatever she does with excellence. Our residents have recognized her many times over the years with teaching awards. All of that would certainly be enough, but not for Dr. Ledowski. She continues to contribute through educational seminars for our faculty supervisors and support for our residents during this time of COVID-19. When she is not busy shaping the future of psychiatry through our residency program, she can be found in our private practice on the east side of Providence. Diana, as a former student, I'm grateful for your teaching. As a program director, I'm grateful for your dedication to training. And as a colleague, I am profoundly happy to welcome you to the rank of clinical associate professor in our department. This promotion is well-deserved, and I'll see you here for your advancement to full professor shortly.
Good evening. I'm Christy Dalrymple, and I'm very pleased to present Dr. Tom Sheeran. So Tom first joined our faculty in 2001. And then sadly, we actually lost him for a few years to Cornell Medical College. And it was actually during that chunk of time when I first met Tom. I don't know if you remember that, Tom, but I was applying for postdoc here at the time. And he was kind enough to talk with me about his experience on postdoc. And I remember thinking at that time, gee, it's too bad that he's no longer here at Lifespan and Brown, but maybe he'll find his way back someday. And luckily here we are, and I'm really proud to call Tom a colleague. So instead of using the term triple threat, I'll state it differently. He has the trifecta of skills. He's an accomplished federally funded researcher. He's a highly skilled clinician with expertise, primarily with geriatric patients and their caregivers. And he's also more recently been providing really high quality care to our partial hospital patients. And he's also a knowledgeable and engaging supervisor. So Tom has served as PI or co-PI on NIMH-funded grants, focusing on increasing access to care for older patients with depression. And I would say Tom has been very much ahead of his time because even back in 2009, he was studying the use of telemedicine to improve depression care and home health care. So for years, Tom has been a champion of telehealth, and we're really fortunate to have him here with us to help guide us during this pandemic. He's been a source of both knowledge and solace to patients, colleagues, and trainees alike, as we've all been trying to navigate our way through telehealth during this challenging time. On a personal note, I found Tom to be bright, genuine, thoughtful, well-humored, and an absolute joy to have as a colleague. So it's not surprising at all to me that trainees find him to be an exceptional supervisor. Trainees have described him as being gifted in his ability to promote growth in both case conceptualization and specific clinical skills, and instrumental in helping them to cultivate both independence and professional identity as a clinician. His well-balanced approach to supervision helps challenge trainees to expand their skill set in a way that they have found to be both supportive and collaborative. So please join me in congratulating Tom on his well-deserved promotion to Clinical Associate Professor.
I am thrilled and honored to present Dr. Rebecca Silver, Associate Professor and Clinician Educator of Psychiatry and Human Behavior. Becca received her PhD in clinical psychology from the University of Oregon before joining the DPHB as a T32 postdoctoral fellow in child mental health. In 2010, Becca transitioned to the faculty and since has played a critical role in the early childhood group at Bradley Hospital as a clinician, as a researcher, and as a mentor to numerous clinical psychology residents and postdoctoral fellows. Becca is really leading cutting edge work at the intersection of policy, practice, and research. On a daily basis, she's working closely with leaders at several Rhode Island state agencies to promote the delivery of evidence-based practices to some of our state's most vulnerable young children and their families. For example, in collaboration with the Rhode Island Department of Education and the Rhode Island Department of Human Services, Becca developed and now leads a statewide mental health consultation program in early care and education settings. Becca also worked closely with the Rhode Island Department of Health to support the professional development of the early childhood workforce, and she directs the early childhood outpatient clinic at Bradley. So if you're interested in working in Rhode Island state systems, Becca is definitely the person that you should call. In addition to this work, Becca has carved out a program of research focused on infant and early childhood mental health and the implementation and effectiveness of evidence-based practices for this population. Becca has seamlessly integrated research and program evaluation activities into all of her consultation and clinical activities. The data from this has been used to refine the programs and the services that she and our colleagues offer at both the state and local levels. I have to say that Becca is an outstanding colleague, and I personally benefited from her highly thoughtful approach and her intellectual rigor. She pushes myself and the other faculty and trainees in our group to think very carefully about the work that we do, the types of questions that we ask, and the way that we interact with state and national systems of care. I can say that one of the things that I miss most since the start of the pandemic are those impromptu hallway conversations and office conversations with Becca that have resulted in federally funded research. And that's one of the things I'm really going to be looking forward to is picking those back up when we're back together at Coro. So we're really truly fortunate to have such a strong leader and also advocate for young children representing our department. Congratulations, Becca, on your promotion.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Bob Swift, and it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Alice Lee Vessner, who this year was promoted to Associate Professor on the Clinician Educator track. Dr. Vessner came to Brown after receiving a BA in Latin American Studies at Hampshire College and her MD degree from the University of Rochester. She completed her psychiatry residency at Brown and then stayed on for a postdoctoral fellowship in geriatric psychiatry, becoming board certified in geriatric psychiatry. Dr. Vessner joined the Department of Psychiatry and Human Behavior as a clinical assistant professor in 2006, working as a staff psychiatrist at the VA. Since her initial appointment, she has taken on increasing responsibilities for trainee education, and she subsequently switched to the clinician educator track. Since 2014, she's been the curriculum director for the adult psychiatry residency program, and she has really made substantive structural and content changes in the residency curriculum. She's an outstanding teacher and mentor, and to medical students, residents, geriatric psychiatry fellows, and has received a number of outstanding teaching awards from the medical school and from departmental trainees. In 2013, she received the Dean's Excellence in Teaching Award, and most significantly, in 2017, she received outstanding teaching awards from trainees in adult psychiatry, geriatric psychiatry, and the triple board program, all in the same year. A rather amazing accomplishment. At the same time, Alice Lee remains a busy, clinically outstanding psychiatrist. Her clinical interests focus on geriatric psychiatry and early psychosis, and she leads the clozapine program at the VA. So Alice Lee, congratulations on this well-deserved promotion.
So now we're moving to those folks who have been promoted from the instructor level to the assistant professor level. We're running a little bit behind in time right now, so we're going to be moving through these quite a bit quicker than the previous promotions. But I want to say that this is the future of the department, and that each of the folks that I'm going to be mentioning tonight, we hope you put a face to a name and become acquainted with all the tremendous work that they've been doing. I've had the opportunity to be having some small group interaction with folks throughout the department, and one cannot help but be incredibly impressed by the quality of work that's being conducted and how people are managing the multiple sorts of demands on their time that include both great clinical work as well as training. So first up is Kim Chapone, who is the director of the UTP at Butler Hospital, where she's been for the past 2 years after coming out of the Brown residency and taking an interlude in New York. She has expertise in OCD and is the person who is involved in the intensive outpatient program in OCD at Butler. Next is Ariane Fotros, if she can get up here. And she has recently joined us from Stanford. She has moved to be clinical assistant professor and is currently a staff psychiatrist in the Rhode Island Hospital Adult Partial Program. She has also recently become the clerkship site director at Rhode Island Hospital for the medical students. And we're glad to see you're being promoted, Ariane. Then we have Marcia Liss, who is a neuropsychologist at Lifespan currently. She works in integrated care in rehabilitation medicine, taking care of those folks who are in the rehab realm, and performs a very valuable service there. Next, we have Daniela Palermo, who is also a product of our residency. She's currently the assistant director for the curriculum in the psychiatric residency, working with Alice Lee Vessner, who's you've just heard about. She also is very active in the diversity aspects of our department. Daniela, we look forward to some great things from you moving forward. Next is Catherine Partridge, who is a clinical assistant professor working in the pediatric partial hospital program at Bradley Hospital. Very important integral piece of the continuum of care that's offered at Bradley. And again, we're looking for continued great clinical work coming from you moving forward, Catherine. Next is Sandhya Patel, clinical assistant professor and psychiatrist at Lifespan, working at both Rhode Island and Miriam hospitals. Congratulations on your promotion to assistant professor level, Sandhya. Next is Mark Perkel, who is also being promoted to clinical assistant professor and is currently working in the Hasbro Integrated Pediatric Medical Psychiatric Inpatient Unit, or Hasbro 6. It's a unique spot where integrated care gets delivered to patients with complex psychiatric and medical problems. You're coming into a very interesting spot, Mark, and again, we're looking forward to great things from you going forward. Next is Shivali Saragwi, and I hope I have that pronounced correctly, who is a clinical assistant professor also at Bradley, where she works in the crisis clinic and has also been working in the developmental disabilities unit. Really two critical spots, and like all of the folks that you've heard about, is balancing really complex clinical cases with training. And finally, we have Louisa Thompson, who's being promoted in the research scholar track, who is currently working in the memory and aging program at Butler, along with Steve Salloway. Louisa has recently received an Advanced CTR K Award, as well as an Alzheimer's Association Award for developing novel digital assessments for early cognitive impairment. She is one of the PIs of the retinal imaging study that's going on with Steve Salloway, and I know that we're going to be seeing some exciting work coming from her in the near future. So I would like to congratulate all of those who are being promoted to assistant professor level and look forward to not very long from now seeing you presented at the associate professor level. Congratulations to you all. Next, we'd like to move on to the faculty honors section of our program. And we have several new emeritus faculty. We're now somewhere close to our 45th year. And although not every one of these faculty have been here for 45 years, it's pretty close. They've been here from the beginning and have been an integral part of the development of the department. And many of them are still associated with various aspects of training and with being trustees and helping out in general with department affairs. So I would like to congratulate Frank Faltis, Greg Fritz, Rich Goldberg, Paul Malloy, and Marjorie Weishar, all of whom have made substantive contributions to the department in the past, and we hope remain associated with the department in the future. We know that you at least get your Brown ID card with Professor Emeritus status, even though you may not be getting high amounts of payment. But your contributions are greatly appreciated. Then I would like to move on to the Clinical Faculty Dean's Excellence in Teaching Award recipients. This year we have two recipients, Karen Francione and Eileen Johnson. Each year our department has the real pleasure of having some of the best teachers recognized by the dean and by the medical school. This is an honor that you should take seriously. Looks really great on your CV, but more than that, speaks to all of the work that you have done mentoring, the folks that you've been teaching, and you should be proud of those accomplishments. So thank you very much for what you do, and continue the great work. Okay, and now to try to get back on schedule, we're going to the introduction of appointments.
So I'm very honored to present all the new assistant professors and clinical instructors who are in the Division of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, who may be at Bradley, Hasbro, Coro, or Rhode Island Hospital. They all have very impressive resumes, and I'll encourage you to read them in the program. For the attendees on the webinar, there's many who weren't able to come tonight. I will call their name, and I think they'll be on the screen, and I'll also tell you where they're working. The first one is Katie Affleck. Katie Affleck is a psychologist on the adolescent inpatient unit at Bradley, and she's also a clinical psychologist at the Rhode Island Training School. Dr. Gandhi, Tanuja Gandhi, came to us from Yale. She is an attending on the Bradley Hospital Children's Inpatient Unit. Next is Dr. Anastasia Kudanova, who is an assistant professor of Friends Research. She's a research psychologist at Bradley, supported by a K-23 Career Development Award to examine neural correlates of self-referential processes in the context of suicide risk. Next is Erin O'Connor, a clinical instructor. She's currently a staff psychologist in the PARC and OCD program at Bradley Hospital. Jacqueline Nessie is the next one, who's an assistant professor. She's a psychologist at Rhode Island Hospital and also funded by a K-23 award. Her study is relating to the role of social media in adolescents' peer relationships and mental health in the context of depression and suicidal behavior. Christina Pastorello, one of our recent graduates in Triple Board, is also a new clinical instructor. She's a staff psychiatrist at Bradley Hospital on the adolescent inpatient unit. Bonnie Patel also came to us from Yale. She's a clinical instructor. She currently works as a child and adolescent psychiatrist on the inpatient Celia 6 at Hasbro Children's Hospital. Dr. Jared Reichenberg is also a recent graduate from our fellowship. He works at Butler Hospital in the adolescent partial program and in their outpatient programs. Kristen Story, a recent graduate also, is a clinical instructor. She currently serves as an attending psychiatrist on the pediatric partial program at Bradley. And then finally, Liz Thompson, who's an assistant professor, a research psychologist at Bradley and Coro, where K-23 project relates to the early psychosis currently underway at Bradley Hospital. And congratulations to all of you.
Hi, I'm Jody Underwood. I'm honored to present 4 faculty appointments from Rhode Island Hospital and the Miriam Hospital. First is Laura Korthauer. She's appointed as assistant professor in the research track. She is a ready and accomplished researcher in Alzheimer's disease and serves as a staff neuropsychologist at Rhode Island Hospital. Next is Caitlin Lawrence. She's appointed as clinical instructor. She is a staff psychiatrist on the inpatient geriatric service and the consultation liaison service at Rhode Island Hospital. She's the director of the resident as teacher program for the Brown Psychiatry residency. Megan Sharp is appointed as clinical instructor. She is currently a research scientist at the Women's Medicine Collaborative at the Miriam Hospital and serves as a staff psychologist for the Lifespan Physician Group. And last but not least, Mohammed Sharif is appointed as assistant professor at Brown and the Carney Institute of Brain Science. Topics of research include ketamine and interventional psychiatry. He's an attending psychiatrist on the ECT service at Rhode Island Hospital and the Norman Prince Neuroscience Institute. Thank you.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Mustafa Surti from Butler. I have to present 3 appointments from Butler. Number 1 is Dr. Brown, Joshua Brown, who came to us from Medical School of South Carolina. He did a combined program in psychiatry and neurology over there. He has a special interest in TMS. Hence, he joined Dr. Carpenter and he's running our TMS clinic with her, where he'll be pursuing his clinical treatment over there and also academic and research interest over there. Next is Dr. Brian Castelluccio, who's a neuropsychologist. He has special interest in neurodegenerative diseases, and hence he's working with Dr. Steve Correa and Dr. Solow in the memory aging program. He came to us after doing postdoctoral fellowship at Brown. Last but not least is Dr. Khalid, who came to us from Rutgers University, where he was chief resident. He also did forensic fellowship at Brown with Dr. Wall here. He has joined our ITU in Butler, where he's treating acutely ill patients. I welcome all three of them. Thank you.
So I have three people I want to present. The first is Stephanie Goldstein. Stephanie has just been promoted to assistant professor, Perens Research. She's been trained by both Graham Thomas and myself. Her interests are testing electronic mobile health, mHealth approaches to really eating behaviors and obesity. She has had an NRSA grant for an individual NRSA individual postdoctoral fellowship. And now she has her own R01 in those areas. So welcome, Stephanie. Second person I want to present is Kaylani Olson. Kaylani came to us to do the obesity clinical research internship. And I've mentored her throughout. She's recently received her own K Award, where she studies individual variability and behavioral weight loss outcomes and the health benefits of weight loss. She's also an adjunct faculty member at Roger Williams University. And finally, the third person is Emily Panza, who's also been promoted to assistant professor, and again is another member of our Weight Control Center. She's been very interested in obesity factors in sexual minority women. She had a T32 fellowship first, but also at the same time a George Bray Research Scholars Fellowship. And then she received recently a K23 award from Minority Health and Health Disparities to fund a research project and training related to sexual minority women and obesity in marginalized populations. So I want to welcome all three of these to assistant professors in our Weight Control Center and congratulate them on all their success thus far. And we know that we have lots more to come.
So I'm really happy to welcome two members of the practice community to our faculty. I'd like to welcome Dr. Stuart Kiritz, who's being appointed to the rank of clinical assistant professor. Dr. Kiritz has a supervision and consultation practice in Providence, and he supervises in the psychiatry department and other settings. And I'd also like to welcome Dr. Lisa Rocchio, who's being appointed to the rank of clinical instructor. Dr. Rocchio is a clinical and forensic psychologist who works from her practice, Lisa Rocchio, PhD and Associates, and is supervising in the adult psychiatry residency program. Welcome to both of you.
Hi, it's my pleasure to introduce Emily Gagan, who was recently appointed assistant professor Perens Research in the department. Emily comes to Brown from Brown. She did her postdoctoral fellowship here in clinical psychology and stayed to become a research psychologist at the Providence VA, where she has helped start up a couple of clinical trials during the COVID-19 pandemic, not an easy task. And Emily also has a longstanding interest in early psychosis and has been working clinically in that area as well. So welcome.
That concludes our program this evening. I hope you all take the opportunity to be able to congratulate each and all of our promoted faculty when you get the opportunity. Their accomplishments are remarkable. We're looking forward to further work and further promotions for each of you. I'd also like to thank all of the mentors who have helped them to get promoted It's a real privilege for me to have the opportunity to have presented all your dossiers to the promotion committees at the medical school. And I think the department has a lot to be proud of with all of your accomplishments. Finally, I'd like to once again thank Holly Wilker for all of her hard work in putting this program together, as well as Media Services for pulling it off with very few hitches. Good evening, and I hope that I'm sorry we weren't able to provide the food and drink that we usually provide, but hopefully we've ended only 10 minutes late, which is pretty good for this program. And I hope you all have a pleasant evening.